On July 4th, 1776, in Philadelphia, a group of men signed their names to an idea so bold it would echo for centuries: that all men are created equal, endowed with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was a promise unlike any a nation had made before. But beneath the celebration sat a hard question. In a land now declaring itself the home of liberty, who was actually free? The answer is complicated. It is also one of the most hopeful stories in American history, because the people the promise left out believed in it anyway. To understand that first Independence Day, start with the arithmetic. About 2.5 million people lived in the 13 colonies. Roughly 1 in 5, close to 500,000 people, were enslaved. And the vote was narrower still. In most places, only free white men who owned property could cast a ballot. By many estimates, around 6% of the population. The Declaration spoke in the name of the many, but its rights were, for the moment, held by the few. The remarkable part isn't only who was left out, it's what they did with the very words that left them out. The largest group waiting on the promise were enslaved men, women, and children. Nearly all lived in the South. In Virginia, about 40% of the population was enslaved. In New England, less than 5%. For them, liberty was not an abstraction, and they pursued it along more than one road. In late 1775, Virginia's royal governor, Lord Dunmore, promised freedom to any enslaved person who left a patriot owner and joined the British, and between 800 and 2,000 answered, reaching for the same liberty the Declaration would soon name. But many more staked their hope on America itself. As early as 1773, enslaved people in Massachusetts petitioned the legislature, turning the colonists' own words back to them. They had, in common with all men, a natural right to be free. In 1777, just months after the Declaration, a group led by Prince Hall petitioned that Black Americans held a natural and inalienable right to their freedom, and thousands took up arms. Crispus Attucks, a man of African and Native descent, was among the first to fall in the Boston Massacre. Salem Poor bought his own freedom, then earned a battlefield commendation at Bunker Hill. The 1st Rhode Island Regiment became one of the Army's first units made up largely of Black soldiers. They fought for a country that had not yet decided to fight for them. Not every Black American in 1776 was enslaved. A small number were free, though their freedom was fragile, hemmed in by law and custom. Some became the young nation's most powerful voices for its own ideals. Phyllis Wheatley, kidnapped from West Africa as a child, became, in 1773, the first African American to publish a book of poetry. She wrote a poem honoring George Washington and the cause of liberty, and Washington received her in return. Prince Hall, a free Black Bostonian, petitioned for abolition and built institutions that would outlast him. These were people claiming a country that had not yet fully claimed them, and insisting, in writing, that its promise was meant for everyone. Then there were the women, half the population, present in every effort of the revolution, and almost entirely absent from its politics. Under a legal doctrine called coverture, a married woman had no separate legal identity. She could not vote, and usually could not own property in her own name. Yet women ran farms and businesses while men marched and organized the boycotts of British goods known as the Daughters of Liberty. And some asked, plainly, to be included. In March of 1776, as her husband John helped shape a new government, Abigail Adams wrote to him, Remember the ladies. It would be nearly a century and a half before American women won the vote, but the argument for it was already being written in 1776 by a woman who believed the promise was hers too. For the native nations of the continent, 1776 carried a different weight. The Declaration named them directly. Its final grievance against the king spoke of the merciless Indian savages on the frontier. Behind those words lay a long struggle over land as settlers pressed west into native homelands. When war came, the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, faced an impossible choice, and it divided them. Most nations sided with the British, trusting the crown to better protect their land and independence. But two, the Oneida and the Tuscarora, stood with the Americans. The Oneida scouted, carried messages, and are remembered for bringing corn to Washington's starving army. Washington said the Oneida had shown the strongest attachment to us, and they are often called America's first allies. Their choice is a reminder that the Revolution was also a native story, of sovereign nations deciding their own future. Even among free white men, the promise was uneven. In the new nation, the right to vote was tied to property. A poor farmer, a day laborer, or a man newly released from indentured servitude often owned too little to qualify, and so could not cast a ballot in the country he had helped build. Indentured servitude had bound many white immigrants to years of unpaid labor to repay the cost of their passage. Only when that term ended did a man gain the standing to vote. It is part of why, by many estimates, only about 6% of Americans could take part in choosing their leaders. The revolution was fought under the banner of no taxation without representation, yet many of the men who fought it still had no representation of their own. Their fuller inclusion would come slowly, as the states loosened the property requirement in the decades that followed. And there was one more line drawn through the promise: faith. In several of the newly independent states, your religion could decide whether you could vote or hold office. Catholics were kept from voting in a number of colonies, Jews in several, and many states reserved public office for Protestants or for Christians alone. A Jewish merchant or a Catholic farmer could serve the cause, pay his taxes, and love the country, and still be told the highest duties of citizenship were closed to him. Yet, even here, the ideal was already pulling the other way. When the Constitution was written a decade later, it would forbid any religious test for federal office, an early, deliberate widening of the circle. In 1776, religious liberty was uneven and incomplete, but the direction had been set. So who was free on July 4th, 1776? Fewer people than the day's soaring words suggested. And yet here is the quiet miracle of that declaration. The promise was bigger than the people who wrote it. All men are created equal was not a description of America in 1776. It was a destination. And almost immediately, the people left out began holding the country to its own words, in petitions and poems, on battlefields, and in letters home. They were patriots not because their nation was already just, but because they believed it could become just, and they gave their labor, their voices, and sometimes their lives to help it get there. That is the American story, a promise made in 1776 and a long, hopeful, still unfinished work of living up to it. We celebrate the 4th not because the founding was perfect, but because it planted an ideal strong enough to eventually include everyone it first left out. Happy Independence Day. If this gave you a new way to see the 4th of July, subscribe to Educating with Dr. Jones. And I'll see you in the next one.